So, ladies and gentlemen, if you can come in, we'd like to start the session now. So if you come in, take your seats, please. Yeah, please do come in, folks. We're already eating into your next coffee break, so come in. Close the doors. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name's Bob Jones. I'm going to chair this session on the EOSC Federation Handbook. As you've heard today, through a number of the sessions, we're talking all about the Federation. We've had the launch of the EU node. We've had discussions about what is the Federation, also from a national and a thematic point of view. And in parallel to all of that, there's a lot of activity going on to come up with the handbook of the Federation. Now, to tell you more about that, we're going to have a presentation, and then we're going to have a panel discussion about the handbook and its current status and where it's likely to go. So it's with great pleasure to start by asking Andy Gotts from the EOSC Association and the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility, who's been one of the key editors for the EOSC Federation Handbook, to come along and give us an overview of the Federation. Andy, over to you. And of course, we have Slido running, so you can ask your questions from the room and online via the Slido as well. The link is here for you. Andy.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Bob, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. My role is to give you an introduction to what has been going on in the writing of the handbook. Yeah? So I'm here also to take your criticism, and if there's any praise, I'll pass it on to the people I've been working with. So, we've heard a lot about people talking about collaboration, and we have to work together, and I think this has really been a collaborative, a mixed top-down, bottom-up approach. So I think we've respected everything that people wanted us to do in terms of sharing. I thought the best thing to start off with is, why do we need a handbook? And I think some of you might also be asking that question, but seeing as this symposium is mainly about building the EOS Federation, the need for the handbook was to come up with something, first of all, that would go beyond most EOS deliverables, which are, I've read many of them, and they're not very precise sometimes. And they also weren't supposed to be written as how-tos. They were more about what has been achieved and what could be achieved. Then we have the EOS Federation and Nodes concept, which is really brought online, I'd say, last year at the EOSC Symposium, and is still not very well defined, so another reason to have a handbook. And then we heard this morning from Michael Arentop that the ambition is to create the first version of the Federation in next year, 2025. And as most of you know, and you've seen from the various panels this morning, we still got a long way to go. So the handbook is there to actually make this easier and also to make this really happen. And finally, we talk a lot about one node, the EU node, is not a federation. You need other nodes as well. And so we need nodes to join. But to join, and I can say, wearing my other hat of being part of the photon and neutron community, it's not possible to commit to something unless you know what it's about. So everyone who answered the questionnaire, there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of people saying, yes, this would be something that I'd like to be part of, but I don't think anyone can commit until we really have the details, and we heard that also during the previous panel as well. So this is one of the goals of the handbook. My aim would be that if I gave that to my colleagues or my institute, they would say, okay, this we can commit to or cannot, so hopefully it'll be the first one. Usually when I'm talking about, and these two book covers sort of sum up where we're going from. So I would say last year was more like, what if we built a federation? And now we're trying to really describe how to build this federation. One important thing is to make the handbook language clear. So as I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of the deliverables have what I call a lot of conditional language in them. There's might, maybe, would be, interesting, and so on. And in English, or I suppose in many languages, you have this concept of a modal verb, which gives you the idea of what is the possibility? Is it actually necessary or just possible? And this was one of the roles that I've been particularly sensitive to as one of the editors, is that the language in there should be as clear as possible for everyone to read. And so I see one of the roles, and I do spend a certain amount of time editing the text that the writers are writing, turning the volume from the left to the right. So going from this might, maybe, to the will, must expression. And I think this is something that will distinguish the handbook from maybe some of the other texts that we have. We didn't start off from a completely blank page, I'd say. We were inspired by what's known as the Elixir Operations Handbook, and we're very happy to have Jonathan as well as Peter. Peter McCallum was also part of the writers group. There's this handbook called the Operations Handbook, which is now in its 7th version already from this year. And we took a look at the outline, and we were inspired by that partly. So we were inspired by some of the subjects, some of the chapters that are in the Elixir Handbook. We were inspired, and this is something which we want to keep also in the EOSC Federation Handbook, is by the brevity, the briefness of the text. If you look at it, I just added the number of pages there. This entire handbook, which I don't know, someone here can tell you in more detail how many facilities are being federated. The handbook is only 27 pages. So it's something you can read in half an hour, and something you can digest and probably say, yes, I can join that. And all the details are kept outside. So there's links going then to more detailed documents as well. So that is something which we'll also try and keep. We've sort of set ourselves a maximum limit of 50 pages, so we already double the length of the Elixir Handbook, but we'll see how we get there. So how was this written? We've been writing this collaboratively, as I said. There was a call for volunteers put out by the EOSC Association with agreement with the tripart governance, and we got 22 writers who are meeting on a weekly basis. There are 10 reviewers who are reviewing then on a monthly basis what the writers are providing. We have 5 editors, where I can mention them so I can share some of the blame. There's Mark, there's Miguel, there's Bob, and we also have the help of Carol, of course, who are then going through the text that's been written and trying to keep it coherent and reducing it as well. And then we hand the text on to the tripartite group, where we have Georgia sitting there, we have Pantelis, we have other people from the Commission, from the member states, and then the tripartite governance. But that meets only every 6 months, and the next meeting, the first meeting where they will see the handbook, will be in November. And finally, there's you. So this is where we want you to get involved, and that's why the open consultation was open before this meeting, and I will be showing you at the end where you can go and provide your input. We're really looking forward and would like the audience and the people in the community to be involved. Just to show you, it sounds all very heavy, but we actually have a lot of fun as well. We meet once a week, and this was a picture of our Zoom meeting last Monday, and there's lots of smiles on most of the faces. So you can see it's not only a chore, but I mean, think of this. There's no extra money involved in this. People are doing this completely voluntarily. So I would say really a huge thank you to all of the people that have been involved. Yeah. Yes, thank you. So what I'll do now is I'm going to just, in the last second half of the talk, go quickly through the outline, because you're going to have to be able to read it yourself. You should read it. But also maybe give you some more insight into some of the chapters there, and maybe some things that are not written, so you understand a bit more the background. And I know some people, and I think it was Ashley who said, well, we wanted to review the whole book and not just, not only half of it. Of course, we also wanted to be able to offer you all chapters, but time didn't prevent us from that. But I think the outlines on the chapters 4, 5, and 6, which are in the pink color, are actually quite evolved. And if we get some feedback on those, this will help us be able to produce the final version quicker. Just about the purpose. So the idea is, and this is one thing that somehow slipped out of this text, because Dale pointed this out to me, is that the text that we are writing is addressing only the immediate future. So next year until 2027. So we are not, we have to lower expectations in the sense of we're not writing the handbook which will last for the next 10 years. We're writing a recipe, a how-to handbook for the next 3 years, and especially to get started next year. And then we're also writing about what will enable, so that we're keeping the view of what is the aim of the Federation there. And finally, how we will measure success. So these were all parts that you'll find in Chapter 1, which we call Purpose. Chapter 2 was really the most difficult one to write, I'd say, in the sense of, as we heard in the previous panel, governance is essential, but of course governance is a very tricky thing to set up as well. Especially before something's being created, and there's a statement, there's no money involved. So what happened is that we've written, and we have people who coming from different backgrounds, people also, we don't have the long-term view from what's going to happen with FP10. We have the Commission, which will provide funding, some funding for various, the end of FP9. But we mustn't forget the resources, like the data and the services, will mostly come from the nodes. So there's this mixture of providers and people who are involved. And so for the current version, this is definitely just to get started. It's clear that the decisions are being made inside the tripartite governance and tripartite group. So that's what it looks like. However, we immediately recognize that you can't create a federation with just a governance body that's meeting only every 2 to 3 weeks, when there's a lot of operational stuff that's going on. So one picture which you won't find in the current one, but which I think is important and will be on the table to be discussed, I think, very early on next year, is that you have the tripartite. We have the nodes forum, which has been agreed. So that's the nodes, the people who are, the organizations becoming the first wave of nodes will be part of the forum and will be providing input. And then we won't be able to create the federation without a day-to-day operational setup. And that's what's called the Federation Management Organization. So this is an idea, and let's say a proposal that we haven't included but have discussed a lot, and which will, I think, very soon be rediscussed as soon as things start getting very concrete, I'd say. And the reason for having this organization is you have all these details you have to deal with: day-to-day operations, management activities, how to apply to become a node. I mean, you have to have someone who's ready to answer questions on a daily basis. Each of the nodes, so this is in Chapter 3, where we've also identified what nodes have to provide. So there are a certain number of roles which are expected of each node. Chapter 4 is mainly addressing the architecture and also the EU node. So now that the EU node is live, we'll be able to include the federating capacities of the EU node in there. Chapter 5 is the one that I really want to write, is the one, and Sally and all of us who come from the science clusters, is what are the scientific resources that are involved, yeah? And if you say that the web of, you often read this, that the EOSC is the web of scientific data, and so we have to explain how you will bring data into the federation, and I think this is where it's going to be very, I mean, it's the thing where I see these are the gold nuggets that are lying out there that we want to find. And I thought I would also just like to bring in the fact that the one reason why I keep on coming here is because I think there are lots of opportunities still out there of scientific data, scientific databases and communities who need help to do something which is similar to what, and I thought the example which was brought up also by Natalie during the panel was the Nobel Prize of Chemistry, which was given a few weeks ago, is based on the data which were provided by 60,000 scientists who deposited structures over the last 30 years. This database is stored or is archived and provided by EMBL. The data now, you see, even this is on the front page of the RCSB, one of the sites that has a mirror of the PDB. It says it's adhering to fair principles. And this data was assured to be accessible with no constraints at all. What happened then, 4 years ago, is that Google DeepMind got involved and interested in this, and they came up with this program called AlphaFold, which is now AlphaFold 3, and has calculated all possible proteins in the world, not only for humans, but for any organism. This was based on fair, open data, and is now, if everyone talks about economies of scale, it's now used by 2 million people around the world. So I think, this is something which is an example where what we heard early this morning from Claudia was with the with FairMat. FairMat could be a future PDB even. And there are other examples like that which I could identify in our community, but I'm sure in your community as well. And just to, one discussion that came up at coffee was, well, we're giving all this data now to the people with lots of money, like Google and Microsoft. What is coming out of this is beneficial, even if that is true. What's coming out can be beneficial to the whole of society. So yeah, 2 proteins, one of them which could be used to recycle plastics, one of the main problems we have today, and the other one that is explaining the resistance to antibiotics, which then you could find something which could work against that. So, I think if we want to have fair data, we have to accept that the big tech companies are going to jump on it, but the results also could be something that we can exploit. I'll finish up with chapter 6, which is quite advanced now. It's about policies. The detailed policies themselves we will have outside, but we'll have the basic core principles of each policy in the text. This is the one page I must show you, which is the survey. We don't have many answers. It's only open since last week, but we'd really, really encourage you to take a look at this. I mean, I was on Saturday, I was at the opera. And halfway through the opera, someone stood up, an actor, and explained that the Berlin Council, the Berlin municipality, wants to cut support to culture by, I think, 100 million euros or something. And he gave the QR code for everyone who was in the audience to go and sign the petition. So I'm doing sort of the same thing here. I need your help. We need your feedback here. Conclusion is, I think we have a wide scope of people involved. This is the same QR code, by the way, in case you missed the first one. We have a group of people who I think are providing a very good and a wide range of input competences. We have a very ambitious goal is to have the 3 remaining chapters ready by the end of next month. Finally, you've heard this often, the whole process is going to be iterative. We need your help. These are the names of the people. You'll find them on the draft that you can download. And I'll finish with one picture which shows sometimes the feeling we have. It feels like we're going through this balancing act because of all the many stakeholders. But I think in the end, we will get to something. And I mean, when I say in the end, that means early next year, we'll have a road we can walk on and not have to balance anymore. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. And you can fund the Berlin Opera, but you can also respond to the questionnaire on the survey on the handbook, okay? What we're going to do now, rather than pointing all the questions just to Andy, we'd like to invite a number of other panelists who have, one way or another, also been contributing to the handbook. So we'll start with Nanette Riesler-Pipka from Max Weber Foundation, and then Sally Chambers from the Digital Research Infrastructure for Arts and Humanities, otherwise known as DARAIA, Giorgio Rossi, the Italian representative on the steering board and from the University of Milan, and Pantelis Zioloko, I hope I ruined that, I think, from the European Commission, DG RTD, for open science and research infrastructures. So just to get the stuff started and get it going, we'll start with ladies first. And so, you know, Nanette, just to expand on my introduction to you and tell us what you're expecting, your community is expecting from the handbook.
Yes, hello, everyone. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm coming from a small foundation from the humanities. It's called Max Weber Foundation, German Humanities Institutes Abroad. We are having 11 institutes around the world with very small units of researchers, mostly historical, and also one for social sciences. And I am also the national coordinator for DARAIA in Germany, and like that, involved in some of the humanities-oriented NFDI consortia. So we are dealing with the researchers directly, but we are also providing distributed infrastructures, which are basically the two big target groups for the handbook, I guess, the providers and the researchers themselves. And yes, we want to see humanities data and social sciences data and services targeted for this disciplinary group in the EOSC in the end. And that's probably my motivation.
Sally, over to you.
Great, thanks. It's first been a pleasure to work with everybody in the handbook team. And for me, the handbook is helping to put, so like Andy, chapter 5 will be very important, but help us put the science into EOSC. So we're working on the Oscars project. So I represent here with other colleagues the social sciences and humanities at the European level, but we're working with our photon and neutron colleagues or our life sciences. And if we can get all of the domains coming together and to contribute to EOSC, and this is the practical way to help us do that, that would be brilliant.
Giorgio.
Thank you. Well, I'm not one of the co-authors of the handbook, but I'm in the loop as a member of the tripartite, so we periodically discuss and sort of internally referee the work that this group is doing. If I have to add a personal motivation for being very keen on this work, is that I coordinated a distributed research infrastructure in nanoscience that has the speciality of accepting only program proposals. So we offer synthesis of materials, characterization, access to fine analysis, which means synchrotron radiation work or free electron lasers, theory, density functional, and of course we try to develop the interoperability of the instruments, and this grows as interoperability of fair by design methods, and of course interoperability of data. So it's very close to the research, the way we are interpreting it, to have the EOSC and to have it well described by the handbook.
Pantelis, what's the Commission expecting from the handbook?
Thanks. So, yeah, indeed, so I'm coming from DGRTD, the Unit for Open Science and Research Infrastructure, so I'm not representing a community, but my expectation from the handbook is something that would be matching the expectations of the communities eventually. And from our side, we have been very much agreeing with the process of having a handbook. That was an idea that was originally coming from the EOSC Association, and we quickly adopted it at the level of the tripartite governance, the tripartite group. And I think we think that it's a very important process. On one hand, to consolidate the kind of information, you know, on a practical and guidance level with plain English and probably the right modal verbs included, of what can be, you know, the reference book for the building of the EOSC Federation. And at the same time, we have seen us, you know, the community, and of course with the enormous help of the volunteers that are putting their time in order to develop the handbook. We have seen also that this is bringing also novel ideas, good ideas that we take into account, maybe not necessarily coming in the handbook in its current version, but they are very important food for thought and also guiding orientations for us for what should come in the handbook in the years to come or in the months to come.
Great. So if there are people from the audience that have questions, just put your hands up. Otherwise, I will start carrying on with the questions and putting people there. So, gentleman here, first of all, in the grey, just in front of the photographer here.
Hi, it's Jordi from the ESRF, and I have a question for the people that contributed to the handbook. So we have listened and we have heard that the handbook is a manual for the next 2-3 years. And my question to you is, do you foresee to have an annex with a roadmap with smart objectives for the EOSC Federation? So specific, measurable, time-bound objectives of what is going to be achieved.
Okay, before putting these people on the spot there, remember this is the handbook. It's not the governance of EOSC, all right? So let's give them a little bit of leniency in how they respond there. Andy, you want to start?
Thank you, Jordi. No, I would also say the SMART objectives, we've put some measures of success in the chapter 1. Those are not converted into metrics yet, but I don't think that would belong in the handbook, personally. I think that could be another document which we would write outside, but the handbook is something which you should give someone who wants to join the Federation, and I don't think they would want to see the SMART objectives as part of that text. They could have a link to them, yeah.
No, that's fine. I think the decision-making process can't be in the handbook. We are kind of a pool of ideas, and we are gathering these ideas, which I like very much about the whole setup and the process. But the frustrating part is that we are not there yet to make these, to set up these goals and objectives you want to hear and everybody is expecting. And that's also a big part of the expectation management, that when we applied for being writers in the handbook, we also thought, well, this is something now finally concrete, and we get to tell everybody what EOSC and the Federation will be about. But then we realized, and this is not a bad thing, we realized that this takes time, and this takes time for discussion with the different groups. And thank you very much for showing us this outline also of the different parts of groups who are involved. And yeah, that's why we need to be more patient and probably more have a longer engagement in view.
Just a quick comment on the time scale, right? So we make this reference to 2 to 3 years. At the same time, we have to, see what is realistic in terms of what we can deliver today, and we see how fast the landscape around the Federation changes. So I think what we see today in the handbook is to be a place where we make some kind of high-resolution snapshot of the current state of affairs of the issues around the EOSC Federation today and maybe in the foreseeable future. If this will be for the 3 years, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that, but at the same time, we see also the handbook not as a standalone document that will be published once and it will never be revisited, but as a living document in a sense where it will be revised once further understanding of how the Federation works will have consolidated and then reflected and transposed in the chapters of the handbook.
So just to pick up on what you've said so far, I think the points coming out as well from what Nanette is saying is that the act of trying to write it down exposed the point that we don't understand all the elements now and we have to clarify some questions. Pantelis, you talked about the iterations of the handbook. What do you imagine to be the appropriate rhythm at which the handbook would be updated?
So we have been discussing about, Michael has set these objectives for next year, right? To have some kind of operational federation. And we would at some point need to engage with organizations that are willing to, come forward and take part in the build-up phase. And I would expect that that process will bring a lot of meaningful and hands-on at that stage experience of how the different components of the federation would function in practice. And possibly this would be very important insights that will need to be reflected in a future version of the handbook. So this is something probably that will happen within 2025 already, in my take. But okay, this is just how I would see that.
May I think the merit of this initiative is to make it a process. So it's not to make an edition of something that perhaps will have next editions with some periodicity, but to become the instrument, the living instrument for building the EOSC Federation as we learn by doing. So something that we lost in our language. Our language is very often filled with knowledge. We lost know-how. There was a big word 20 years ago. And I think the handbook should be the know-how to build the EOSC Federation, which of course will grow in time. One deadline for a new edition, I suspect, just to make it simple, when FP10 will be published. At that point, the know-how will have to be adjusted to what are the instruments at that very time to keep on going for the... so I would rather consider it a reactive process that when conditions at the boundary are significantly changing, then our know-how must be refined and the handbook will follow.
Just taking some points from Slido, sort of, so how does the handbook take into account the results coming from EOS projects? How is that built into this process?
Let me try and do that and link it to Geordie's question about smart objectives. For me, I think if the handbook becomes this process and this living document, I would love to have examples where we say chapter 3.7 and we describe something, and then we've got either reference implementations or links to real life examples. And this could be the way that if it comes from an EOS project and they have got a reference implementation of a particular thing, then we can link it as a practical example. Go and have a look at that to see how it's done.
I would agree. We're referencing documents in there already, so existing deliverables. But my experience with deliverables is that they're usually a minimum of 100 pages, sometimes 200 pages. They're dealing with a single aspect of this, maybe not even a whole chapter, and we're trying to stay under 50 pages. So just numerically, we're going to have to condense a lot what is in the deliverables. we also have a good representation of people who have a wide experience in different projects. So I think we will link out to existing documents where it makes where they are related, and the rest will be digestions by the people that are on the panel.
Okay. One other point that's come across in the Slido as well is today we've been talking a lot about the federation, highlighting the point about interoperability. So what level of detail do we expect the interoperability per nodes, between nodes, can be covered in the handbook? Comes back to what you were saying, Andy.
Yeah. My first take on that would be, we must be realistic. If we want to achieve something next year, we can't have a complicated interoperability guide to implement and follow. It's going to have to be very simple, a basic set of interoperability, let's say, requirements, which I think will be very simple. If you think, we heard this a few times before this in the previous session, there many services exist already. And actually the big challenge, or say the first step, is to bring those together, not to tell them how to re-implement everything they have that's working already. So I think we'll have basic interoperability guides. That's my feeling.
Okay. Open up for questions on the floor. Yeah. Okay, we'll start over there. Since you're closest, start over there. We'll come round, don't worry.
Okay, hello. I'm Najla Retberg from Base for NFDI. So at the beginning of the summer, we set off on a little journey to find out how our services, potential services, could be interoperable with EOSC. And we found ourselves faced with a mountain, a Himalaya of many, many documents coming out of EOSC. And I'm not just talking about the projects, I'm talking about the legacy, the SRIA, the Iron Lady, the Straw Man, really good stuff. And I kept stumbling over, oh, that's actually relevant too. I mean, literally, our bibliography, because we've just written a policy paper, is about 200, references. So maybe something key documents, not just references, but a place at the top. What are the key documents you should read in starting out to understand interoperability would be really useful in this, because those are key things that have been hugely useful in this process. And the second thing about the handbook, we're all in heterogeneous environments, national and everything, but I think maybe we should see it as a co-creation process. And I think if you can take some nodes and get their experiences of using this and hear them, and they can feed into this. So a day in the life of really trying to set out with services being interoperable would be hugely useful. Otherwise, it's great work, but we're happy to contribute in any way. Thank you.
Okay, I see that all the panel are nodding, so nobody's disagreeing with you on that point, I don't think. No?
Yeah, maybe just adding to this point, that was, Najla, we wrote this paper together, and I was struggling with you, but the problem is it needs to be the living document, and every bibliography you put in will be outdated very fast. So, and this is also some kind of the confusion we are in the middle of, because it's such a dynamic field that every definition you make, every rule you set might be overcome when the next whatever top-down decision is made, and that's what we are facing.
Yeah, I think this is really, really crucial that we can boil down it to the essential steps. So I would even like to challenge Andy, 50 pages. I would love to have a one-pager, more or less, where we've got that is kind of covering the different things with references to the different chapters to get enrolled as a node. And it's really really practical and boiled down as much as possible, so we get away from the mountain of paperwork to what is the essential nuggets to participate in the EOSC Federation.
Yeah, and I would add also for the interoperability, we should say the nuggets. What are the minimum aspects we want to interoperate? And I think this is where I see a lot of the documents have gone too far. They've tried to treat all aspects of interoperability, which becomes a huge job. So I would, for instance, say searching for resources should be the first interoperable service we could have, something which is really useful.
And in fact, one of the things that's coming up on Slido is will there be a comprehensive searchable interdisciplinary catalogue for all the data sets in there as well. So that'll be important there. Okay. There was a question earlier down here on the left.
Yeah, Ivo Janmaat from SURF. Yeah, I think everybody here in the room is eager to read 27 pages, but if I ask my daughters to read them, they say, where's the first chatbot I can use to ask the question I want the answer to? So are there any plans to create an AI chat bot for EOSC?
I don't know if you saw my last slide. None of the text, to my knowledge, has been written by generative AI. So the current text is written by humans, yeah? But we could have a chatbot on that, and I think I've even suggested at the French, we had the France EOS meeting, that we should have some LLM looking at all these documents that we have produced over the years for EOSC and providing something there. I see someone has an idea behind there.
The back. Wait a minute, please wait for the microphone so the people online can hear you as well.
I just wanted to respond to that. We just announced LLM for EOSC before EOSC Forum, so why not?
Yeah. Could be an opportunity as well. Okay. We're at the back? I can't see because of the lights. Yes, please, at the back, then left.
Hey, hi. Clément Jonquet, working at INRA in France, involved also in Fair Impact. We have a general concern, I think, about going back a little bit to the question that was asked about the project, the InfraEOS project, and the recommendation that they will produce. Typically, Fair Impact is one of those projects. And I'm skimming through the handbook, and very often the document being produced for building EOSC, and I don't really see where the information like produced by the project are coming back to the association. So I think we have the feeling that we are working with the association and get the recommendation, to actually do things with them. But when we produce things, we don't see reference back. So I haven't seen, for example, any reference to the task forces that have been, there have been 2 generations of EOS task forces, and we don't see in the handbook sentences that will say, look, we want you to implement or follow that, because that's the result and the recommendation of the task forces. Now we have the opportunity areas that's going to produce also some recommendation with different mechanisms, and the project themselves. So we're not just talking about making a reference in 50 pages, make a reference to a place where there will be 200 pages of document, but just endorsing is the handbook going to help us to endorse, or help the association, help the federation to endorse some of those recommendations, and so give them some impact.
I don't know if this is an answer, but I think we need to get better at that. So, for example, Andy and I are in the Oscars project, and we think some of the direct work that we're doing in Oscars on how the domains will engage with EOSC can come into Chapter 5. But maybe what we need, and this is just off the top of my head, we haven't discussed it, what we could do is sort of do the mapping to where we need to understand, is there a particular project working on a particular area, or a task, either the new task forces or the old task forces, to make sure, because it is a discovery in some ways, all of the different deliverables coming from either different task forces or projects, we need to sort of map those and make sure that we have a structured way to bring in or link to that information. I think it's a great idea.
I think at least the 3 chapters you haven't seen yet. In the last chapter, we did refer to the what is it? The policies, rules of participation. So we went to the rules of participation. The advantage of the ROP document is it's very short. Now, if you go to interoperability, it's much longer. We're still writing that section, but I would like to not challenge, but ask for help there. Could people who were involved in the interoperability task force provide us with a 1-page summary?
This sounds like a good occasion to highlight the upcoming EOSC Association Winter School, where we're trying to bring together the task forces and the projects and the opportunity areas with a focus around how we can contribute to the federation, and of course the handbook is part of that federation setup as well. Okay, time for 2 more questions. Who else wants to raise them? No? Okay, well in that case, we've talked about the process of the way the handbook is being written. It's been highlighted, it is a co-creation process, it is relying on volunteers. We need to bring in these other sources, the results of the projects and so on. Is this the right way? Is there something missing in this process that we should add in to the overall approach? Giorgio.
I think what is a little bit missing, not necessarily in the handbook, but in our common understanding, and who will be the first users of this handbook. So we are talking here to representatives of the scientific communities, and representatives of some institutional organizations, but the handbook, I think, should be useful and should be addressed also to decision makers. And therefore, not only be in a clear language, but contain, for example, condensed in 1 page, what was discussed even in this symposium, cost-benefit analysis, because this is what you have to tell to your ministerial people in a simple, clear way what the benefits are. Sustainability of the whole research system, EOSC will be advantageous, but it will cost locally some investment. So this part of the analysis that I think is a thick analysis, but can be as well summarized, should become an element of the handbook, because the handbook, I think, in this stage, is also a message to the decision makers to agree, support the Commission or the Parliament to invest in these, and support internally the research performing organizations to concentrate on financing and hiring the right people, and etc.
Maybe. Personally, I really like the way that it's been set up with these different layers and different iterations. As we move forward, maybe it's a good idea to have an editorial board that sort of stays for a certain period of time, maybe for an edition of the handbook. I think we have got to be a bit careful that we don't make a moving target, so it's balancing an edition lasting long enough, but having the living document to update that process as well. But if you've got new nodes coming in, they don't want the rules to have changed before they've done it. So it needs to be, it's a balance between being long enough and keeping it fresh and up to date.
Yes, maybe what is missing is not how to become a node, but also how to not become a node, meaning how to spare the time to organize your own node and connect to another one. So we can't discuss that yet, because for that we would need to know who to connect. So the initial nodes should be there before we discuss that. But this is, now everybody is nervous and thinks, thank you, that it's not, we don't want to miss out. We need to make an application to become a node. But in fact, it's just a lot of work. And you have to look, do you have the resources? And it might be easier if your service is nice and ready to connect to another node. And we didn't have this in mind. We are always discussing what can be the EOS node and so on.
Okay, so that covers one of the questions we had from Slido. So what parts do we think are missing? So how to contribute to the federation without setting up a node, essentially, things like that. Okay. The other parts on Slido as well is sort of, do you think there's any stakeholders that are missing in this co-creation process? So who's going to say the user word?
The users, yeah, the users. But also, first of all, this audience. So if anyone wants to get involved, the survey is actually quite brief. So you answer whether you agree, you don't agree, and you can add some comments to it. But if anyone wants to get involved in a deeper way, we would welcome that. Yeah? So you can send us also a document with all track changes on and all the things you think need to be improved. So we'd be very happy to get input from here. And then, yes, the users. But as I said, I mean, we say in the outset in the document, this document is not for users to be read. It's not to be, normally it's not the audience it's supposed to serve, the result will serve the users, but the document is not really one I would give to researchers because they don't want to become a node. They want to do science, yeah.
Okay. So we looked about potential subjects that are missing. One of the other things that's been discussed today as well is the idea of the node forum. So what role would we see the node forum playing in this process of developing the handbook?
Yeah, and this is maybe also links to the question of what may be missing at this early stage before we have a fully fledged operational EOSC Federation. And this could be something that it can be brought by the work that the forum of cardinal nodes or nodes forum can bring, would be exactly because the target audience, target group for the handbook is actually organizations that are interested to join the federation and not necessarily the end user. Of course, it can be of use for the end user as well. What could be included at this early stage is a place where we can actually demonstrate, some kind of use case of how an organization that will be enrolled in the EOSC Federation can actually see the value of this organization's enrollment, some kind of end-to-end demonstration of a use case within coming from the organizations that will be actually already taking part in this early stage development.
I'm very, very happy that the EOSC Nodes Forum was agreed, and I think that's been agreed by the tripartite, so this is brilliant. Maybe it goes back to the chatbot question a little bit. The Federation should become a community of nodes, and if we're talking about implementation of AAI or how to make our service discoverable, I think it's going to be the nodes helping each other. So it's what is when we set up a node, the day-to-day operations of running a node, and we can exchange the information between the different nodes of how to make the federation actually work. So for me, this is the community of nodes, and this will be incredibly important to help other nodes coming on, and I see it kind of a node maturity. So you may come in at the minimum requirements level, but then as you progress as a more mature node, and this is the Nodes Forum, which will help that process.
Giorgio.
Yes, I think an important aspect that will be part of the learn by doing is accurate costing of the operation. I mean, and this, coming from the experience of research infrastructures, we have been through a number of roadmaps, very well-refined and advanced methodologies to select, to identify priorities, but still we are missing a rigorous cost analysis and benefit analysis. Benefits may be self-evident, but there are more than those that are self-evident, but the cost analysis. And starting the federation with a limited number of nodes that probably in most cases are already producing data services, and they will have to upgrade, upscale their services, maybe this differential costing will be not too difficult to be analyzed and will be an input information of very much value for the further increase of the federation with the next waves and etc. So cost analysis, I think it's important within the concept that anyhow it's a way to make research sustainable, but we have to have the bookkeeping also in our methodology.
Okay, we're coming to the end. I don't see any more raised hands. Please, take that.
the comment I'd make is it comes back to the diagram I showed. I think what I'm hoping that is once the governance is sorted out, the first version of the governance, we will have this, what we call the Federation Management Organization, which would then be the face of the Federation. And I think you mentioned that this morning. We need, it's good to have this ambition and have all these goals, but someone and some people have to make this happen. And I think having just nodes, also having a lot of nodes, no one node will speak on behalf of the others. So if you want to say, what is a federation, or ask a question to the federation or get an answer, you'll need to have a management organization who can speak on behalf of the federation. So I think this is also key to getting this off the ground. Yeah.
Okay. So stopping there, just with the final opportunity for you to make a remark. Giorgio highlighted that he thought an important milestone would be when we move to Framework 10. Okay? What would your ideal handbook look like then?
Well, the ideal handbook might contain indications of opportunities, instruments, new conditions in which develop, implement the existing nodes or new nodes by the community. I mean, this is, as boundary conditions change, the handbook should adapt, also suggesting that there are these new opportunities.
I would love by then that we have 5 at least nodes implemented and you can click through and actually see them in operation.
Yeah, I would pick up on your example and add that what we saw, the example I showed with the PDB, this was all done without EOSC. This was done before EOSC, and then it became fair. If we could, the EOSC could accelerate those kind of examples in the future, it would have played a very useful role.
I would like to see the handbook as a real manual, a bit like Jordi mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, with rules and definitions and maybe even small policies in place which stay a bit longer than a year.
Yeah, not much. I think what Andy already presented in his slides is not far away from what I would see eventually, the handbook, 27 or even less pages, maybe with pointers towards more technical specifications and documentation, but providing an end-to-end understanding for organizations that are interested to enroll or on board, how this can be done in practice.
Okay, so with that, we'll end this session. Before thanking the speakers, look on the slide again, as Andy highlighted, we're very much looking forward to your input as part of the open consultation. It will be taken into account. These people have shown that they're very cooperative in a co-creation process. So please take the time to read through it in between a couple of beers. Read through it, it's not that long at the moment, and give us your feedback. Please thank the panel.